Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is James Gunn's and Marvel's new movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The story follows Star-Lord, played by Chris Pratt, reconciling with Gamora, who's played by Zoe Saldana, after she, in a weird time-traveling sense, came back to life through alternative timelines through the movies Infinity Wars and Endgame. But the main focus of the story is that Rocket, played by Bradley Cooper, is trying to run away from the High Evolutionary, played by Chadwick Inji. Sorry if I completely botched his name, but he's running away from him after growing up in an extremely abusive relationship, as he was basically like a test animal or a lab rat for his evil experiments to create the perfect society. And of course, the Guardians have to put the end to the High Evolutionaries' almost Messiah-like complex and playing God with his own civilization that he created. To say that the build-up for the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie being tumultuous is a bit of an understatement. Even though the first two films were critical and massive box office success, however, the spanner was pretty much thrown into the works when James Gunn was fired from Disney after some very problematic tweets regarding rape and pedophilia, which of course, which is something that Disney really did not want to deal with, so he was kicked out. But within that time, he signed up for the 2021 DC movie, The Suicide Squad, while at the same time, literally, only a couple months later, I think, he was brought back in by Marvel to only realise that he's working on with DC for the Suicide Squad movie. And for a long story short, the movie Suicide Squad was critically acclaimed, but did abysmal numbers in the box office. And it caused him to be promoted to the head of DC, and announced he's directing the Superman Legacy movie, which, okay, and did it on a condition that he's allowed to contribute to the marketing and post-production of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And with that in mind, it did like stir up a lot of heated debate and a lot of backlash towards Disney and Marvel, particularly with Dave Bautista, who went as far as to say he would quit playing Rax in future movies, unless they of course brought back James Gunn, and of course they ended up doing so. Let's see. After some tumultuous delays and some setbacks, it's finally here, and the movie is actually really good. I'll explain why. To sum the entire movie up, the movie is basically about the Guardians being at a bit of a weird crossroads of where to go next after the events of Endgame, and a really brief cameo in Thor: Love and Thunder, which is really one of the few good things in that movie. But however, it was basically that Peter Quill had some granddaddy issues. Gamora came back and is basically a complete ass to everyone. Not like in the first one, but like that, but in steroids. Rocket has some pent-up childhood trauma, and Groot is Groot. So it was just a case that the entire gang was no longer feeling the need to run away from their problems, but in a sense they're going to have to confront them, no matter how much it would hurt them in the long run, and no matter if it could cause them to go their separate ways in the grand scheme of things. The typical edginess that James Gunn has been well known for, particularly before his superhero days, are again very, very prevalent in this movie. With Gamora and Nebula having some very unfathomably great chemistry between each other, and the crew, of course, bouncing off each other, which is also something I really like to see in the films, which is also what made this franchise so special in the first place, and also MCU's first F-bomb, which again was done in a very comedic way, which again, I think I was expecting people to be shocked by it, but when I watched it in the cinema, people kind of giggled a little bit. Like, it's basically a scene where Peter Quill schools Nebula for not knowing how a car opens its door. Like, first, you press the button, then you open the door and get in the effing car. So, it was kind of a little bit hilarious. I don't know why, but it's just a little bit hilarious, and for my opinion, like, they actually allowed James Gunn to do it. But I think if it's the one director that the MCU or Disney will allow an F-bomb in their movies, it will definitely be James Gunn. Like, I think it was, I was surprised by it, but not surprised at the end of it. And what we all came here to see is the High Evolutionary, portrayed by Chuck Daddy Ariju. Sure if I completely botched his name, but here's the point, that he is a really intimidating villain. Played by an actor who at this point, even though film roles he's known for something like John Wick 2, but he is mostly known for like Shakespeare performances and a lot of like theatre work around that era. Again, I think he kind of gave off this antagonistic flair that's very commonly found in like a lot of Shakespeare plays and literature, which he kind of really embodied really well as pretty much a villain who plays God in his uppermost strength, like to the point he basically has what I would like he has animals stored away, he has like children stored away in his basement, which is a little bit creepy if you think about it. To the point he's basically running a Noah's Ark from hell, and I wanted to create a perfect society with the perfect people. And yet the people he created look like how I imagine AI art would create antagonists for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. As it, even though they're all ugly, they're still beautiful and act the way I wanted them to do. And you see them like picking fights in streets and doing meth in streets. Like, James Gunn, like, we all knew what you were doing. Like, this is like... I think the most edgiest thing that Marvel could like conceivably get away with, and that James Gunn, he pretty much wants to end the trilogy with a bang or a major dosage of edge. The movie's soundtrack, which is a massive key selling point for this trilogy, and considering that James Gunn does love to use a lot of like nostalgic soundtracks from the 70s and 80s and maybe a little bit of the 90s. And this one, he does gravitate away from 70s soundtracks, which is what the first two films were primarily known for soundtrack-wise, and uses more contemporary stuff, like from mostly stuff from 90s and 2000s, and maybe some in 2010s. Like, it starts off with like Radiohead's Creep and Florence and the Machine's Dog Days Are Over, and I don't know why James Gunn, now I cry listening to Dog Days Are Over. Thank you, James. But anyways, I think the way he effectively uses these soundtracks, as well as bands like Flaming Lip as well, which is also a very well-known alternative rock band from the 90s, and uses that in the trailer as well, and also a song Since You've Been Gone, which is also a brilliant song, again utilized it to his key advantage. And of course, the movie is it's definitely a satisfying conclusion, as in it does finally clear up the arcs. Like, it finally just puts everything in full circle, like the character arcs on each and every character. Like, Mantis went from dependent to essentially independent. Rex finally gained something that he lost. Like, pretty much all these characters have pretty much regained or finally gained something they've lost, pretty much from the first film or from either 2 or the Endgame Infinity Wars era of Avengers. But again, it is a very, very satisfying way of how they all like bowed their heads down to the audience and said, this is basically the end of the group now. And it's basically the way they go their separate ways. It's basically them completing their arc, like what they started off with, like what they've lost and how they ended up in this position, and how they essentially now regain their humanity, and how they basically at the end became what they were before all of it came down. Like, it's very bittersweet, to the point I basically cried to Florence and the Machine. Like, why do you have to do this to me, James? Even though Marvel has definitely not had the most consistent track record as of the past 3 or so years, but this movie, I feel like, is definitely one of the better ends of the movie, and definitely one of the better ends of the final installment, officially, of the Marvel series, as in, the action scenes are really good. The performances of Chris Pratt and a lot of the characters in the movie are really great as well. The movie is visually very gorgeous. The soundtrack, it definitely evolved in a way that was definitely natural for the movie. The character arcs are very satisfying and how they conclude them. And also the villain in that movie is really intimidating to the point he was really theatrical and could maybe then be the next big bad in the MCU. And of course his fate wasn't too well known, and that Jonathan Majors could be given a boot over his domestic abuse violence. But again, I'm very pleased. This is the film we got after all this trepidation about James Gunn and his Twitter and his being rehired, only to find out he got into DC and Suicide Squad. I'm really pleased this is a movie that Marvel fans have got, and we cinema audiences finally get after almost something like 6 years of waiting for their movie. So I'm feeling an 8 out of 10. So, what do you think of the Guardians of the Galaxy's Volume 3? Let me know in the comments, subscribe to my channel, like this video, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and this is Elijah Wells, and bye!